Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 So we continue reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, 3rd canto, chapter 33, entitled Activities of Kapila. We read text 16 and 17. Bhaya,
Bhaya,
Phena,
Lena,
Nibha,
Nibha,
Shaya,
Shaya,
Danta,
Danta,
Rukma,
Rukma,
Parichadaha,
Parichadaha,
Asanani,
Asanani,
Cha,
Cha,
Haimani,
Haimani,
Susparshastaranani,
Susparshastaranani,
Cha,
Cha,
Bhayapenani Bhashaya,
Bhayapenani Bhashaya,
Bhayapenana Bhashaya,
Bhayapenani Bhashaya,
Danta Rukma Parichadaha,
Danta Rukma Parichadaha,
Asanani Cha Haimani,
Asanani Chaimani,
Asanani Cha Haimani,
Asanani Chaimani,
Susparshastaranani Cha,
Susparshastaranani Cha,
Susparshastaranani Cha,
Susparshastaranani Cha,
Bhayapenani Bhashaya,
Bhayapenani Bhashaya,
Danta Rukma Parichadaha,
Danta Rukma Parichadaha,
Asanani Cha Haimani,
Asanani Chaimani,
Susparshastaranani Cha,
Susparshastaranani Cha,
Bhayapenani Bhashaya,
Bhayapenani Bhashaya,
Anta Rukma Parichadaha,
Danta Rukma Parichadaha,
Asanani Chahaimani,
Asanani Chaimani,
Susparshastaranani Cha,
Susparshastaranani Cha,
Bhayapenani Bhashaya,
Bhayapenani Bhashaya,
Danta Rukma Parichadaha,
Danta Rukma Parichadaha,
Asanani Chaimani,
Asanani Cha Haimani,
Susparshastaranani Cha,
Susparshastaranani Cha, Bhaya,
Bhaya,
of milk, Pena,
Pena,
the foam, Nibha,
Nibha,
resembling,
Resembling,
Shaya,
Shaya,
beds, Danta,
Danta,
made of ivory,
made of ivory,
Rukma,
Rukma,
golden,
golden,
Parikshadaha,
Parikshadaha,
with covers,
with covers,
Asanani,
Asanani,
chairs and benches,
chairs and benches,
Cha,
Cha,
and Haimani,
Haimani,
made of gold,
made of gold,
Susparsha,
Susparsha,
soft to the touch,
soft to the touch,
Astaranani,
Astaranani,
cushions,
cushions,
Cha,
Cha,
and
and
translation, and then later purport also has to language of Prabhupada,
Cha.
The opulence of the household of Kardama Muni is described herein. The bed sheets and mattresses were all as white as the foam of milk. The chairs and benches were made of ivory and were covered by cloths of lace with golden filigree. And the couches were made of gold and had very soft pillows. Then there's no purport to this verse. I read the next one. Svachaspatika kutyeshu mahamarakateshu cha ratna pratibha abhanti lalana ratna samyutaha. The walls of the house were made of first-class marble, decorated with valuable jewels. There was no need of light, for the household was illuminated by the rays of these jewels. The female members of the household were all amply decorated with jewelry. Purport. It is understood from this statement that the opulences of household life were exhibited in valuable jewels, ivory, first-class marble, and furniture made of gold and jewels. The clothes are also mentioned as being decorated with golden filigree. Everything actually had some value. It was not like the furniture of the present day, which is cast in valueless plastic or base metal. The way of Vedic civilization is that whatever was used in household affairs had to be valuable. In case of need, such items of value could be exchanged immediately. Thus, once broken and unwanted furniture and paraphernalia would never be without value. This system is still followed by Indians in household affairs. They keep metal utensils and golden ornaments or silver plates and valuable silk garments with gold embroidery. And in case of need, they can have some money in exchange immediately. There are exchanges for the moneylenders and householders. Om Ajnanatimidandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshurum Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapidam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swavarantikam Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vagisha yasya varane, Lakshmi yasya chavakshasi, yasya dele samvit, tam narasimham aham vaje, Praladariya yaladam, bhaktavitya vidaram, sharatim durjim vande parindra vandanam harim. So the text again. The opulence of the household of Kardama Muni is described herein. The bed sheets and mattresses were all as white as the foam of milk. The chairs and benches were made of ivory and were covered by cloth of lace with golden filigree. And the couches were made of gold and had very soft pillows. The walls of the house were made of first-class marble decorated with valuable jewels. There was no need of light, for the household was illuminated by the rays of these jewels. The female members of the household were all amply decorated with jewelry. Could someone tell whoever is practicing the Dhamma perhaps do that later and rather join the class?
Kula. There's always a Saturday morning just practices.
So, here's some interesting description. It's about how did it look like in the household of Kardama Muni. The personality of Kardama Muni is described some chapters before that in the Bhagavatam, and Kardama Muni is one of the Prajapatis. A Prajapati is one empowered living entity which is installed, so to say, by Brahma himself to create progeny in the universe. There's an interesting aspect of how the Vedic perspective on creation is. There's no concept of things evolved from really one-cell organisms gradually to complex organisms like we are human beings. There it is said that they are already complete beings on a spiritual platform which accepts some more subtle material existence platform, and they actually manifest forms of life. And it's described that the Prajapatis, they are full also of mystic opulence. Mystic opulence means you can manipulate matter or form it way out of the range of conditioned living entities. For us it's like really amazing and mind-blowing to think of what they can do. Simply change your body, or like expand your body in several parts and so on and so on. Or control a whole element, like air, water, fire, etc. and so on. And they are two, there's Prajapati male and female. And it said they accept certain forms like animal forms, human forms, demigod forms, and then they engage in intercourse and in this way populate the universe. So they have already the ability to manifest a particular species. It does not evolve gradually by some chance. It's already there in the blueprint, so to speak. And then they manifest this form, and then they multiply within this form, and in this way, from the Vedic perspective, the population of the universe is being done. So they live on a very high level of material existence. You know, they're not as conditioned as we feel like in our time and age and circumstance. And we naturally also, they have different opulence or different life circumstances on the higher planetary systems. And they reside in realms that are much more a manifestation of sattva. There's still guna, at the same time there's much more spiritual potency involved, it's much more full of potency, enjoyment, lasting enjoyment comparatively, because the time also goes way slower comparatively in the heavenly planets than it goes here. And here is described that everything there is very sublime. And the Bhagavatam in general is giving us an understanding of what is valuable, what is worthless, what is important, what is unimportant, what is needed, what is not needed, by comparison. There are always different comparisons, like in terms of states of existence, for example. Here, like also in this verse, and we will hear later, the equipment, so to speak, is compared from a heavenly being to a material being on the earthly planets or even lower planets. Then also we find comparisons in terms of gradations of saints or personalities, and then it said whom one should associate with and whom not. Different types of duties and their result. And it's always highlighted at the end what is supposed to have the most value for a living entity, which is a very important topic or an issue, because this is what it is all about, to recognize, also particularly in this form of life, which is short, what is of most value. But besides the ideal value in terms of what shall I do and what is my mission and how do I use my life energy best, there are also values on the material platform in terms of matter, like household paraphernalia is mentioned here. And here said bed sheets and mattresses were all as white as the foam of milk, chairs and benches made of ivory. You know, ivory is from with the elephant teeth. This is a type of very sublime material. Covered with cloths of lace with golden filigree. In German you'd say filigrane, aber Spitzen Decken. So very sophisticated arrangements. The golden couch. You know, also gold is a very soft metal, so it's like in a way processed that you can even make furniture out of it. So everything is very valuable. And Srila Prabhupada makes the point that also the house was made of first-class marble, decorated with valuable jewels. There was no need of light, for the household was illuminated by the rays of these jewels. The female members of the household were all amply decorated with jewelry. So they all had a lot of valuable items with them. And just imagine yourself being in a room which has really sublime marble and jewels, like there's rubies, there's smaragd, I don't know in English all the names, but so many valuable stones, and they give light. It said here. There was no need of an electricity as we have it, so there was some natural, very pleasant light, obviously, which was giving the mind a very pleasant sensation. So therefore it said the heavenly planets also, they are very attractive. But the idea is not to attract you to the idea of go to the heavenly planets. This is actually already also manifestation of spiritual Shakti. It is said there are two types of siddhis, or like these mystic yoga perfections. One type arises from the material mode of goodness, and one is directly from Krishna, or coming from Vishnu, mystic opulences to fulfill desires, for example, to manifest things that you desire, and so on. So here Kardama Muni was a great sage, and of course he arranged for his wife also to feel comfortable, particularly when they were about to multiply, to create progeny, or that Kapila Dev supposed to appear in their womb, in the devotee's womb. Just let's understand that the heavenly planets are in one sense a trap for the living entities because they could be attractive as material enjoyment. At the same time also the heavenly planets or like the higher states of existence resemble more what is in the spiritual world. Because we understand that the sattva and is the highest to the transcendence, and there's Shuddha sattva. So we should also understand that it's actually not such a clear cut. There's sometimes description of Brahmaloka, that Brahmaloka is sometimes considered partially already a spiritual planet, and sometimes material. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Abhava, Bhuvana, Loka, etc., that from up to down there, everything is still temporary. But in other places in Bhagavatam, we also find that there's apparently not such a clear cut, but there's some kind of gradual transition, like some shades, so to speak. There's practically almost, there's no suffering in Brahma's place. You take birth, you're fully developed and equipped. There are practically no worries, just it finishes at some point. That's it. So this resembles much more already the existence in the spiritual world, where things are permanent, eternal, and full of opulence. And Krishna is also always, you never hear of Krishna's place or Krishna being in some kind of dirty, filthy place, staying there, or like being poor. Like he always is surrounded by all his opulences and energies. They're always there. And we are supposed to become attracted to this realm of Krishna. And also, Lord Brahma is glorifying this realm by chanting the Brahma Samhita. Chintamani prakasasatma sukhalpa vriksha laksha briteshu surabhira vibhalayantam lakshmi sahasra shatasam brahma sevyamanam govindamani purusham tamaham bhajami. There he describes that there's an element called touchstone, Chintamani. In the material world there's some examples. There's a form of stone very valuable that can turn matter into valuable gold or whatever you want it to be, practically. And instead, everything is made there of this stone. Very unique. Then there are kalpa vrikshas, trees, beautiful trees that can or do provide whatever you want from them. Might not just be foodstuffs, but also clothing and whatever. In the spiritual world, there's no limit to items and things you can use and apply in Krishna's service. So they supplied it. And then there's also Surabhi cows. They're practically the animal version of a kalpa vriksha. And they give also they give unlimited milk, of course, but also other things. They're also like desire cows, you could call them. You know? So they're full of opulence. In the spiritual world, there's no scarcity of anything. Everything is just full overflowing, so to speak. And always, therefore, the spiritual world is also expanding. And this thought we should have in mind when we think of Krishna. And then there's further described Lakshmi Sahasra. There are thousands of Lakshmis. In the Brahma Samhita is then translated as gopis. In Goloka Vrindavan, these Lakshmis, because originally they expand from Srimati Radharani, so these Lakshmis mentioned there in Goloka Vrindavan, of course, they're gopis. So they always serve Krishna and he enjoys association with them. So there's, for him, he's called Bhagavan because riches, wealth, and also fame and beauty, all these opulences are always there with him. They're like intrinsically there. And the Bhagavatam is meant to attract us to this idea. But what can happen is that the soul, being entrapped in the material body, in the material existence, thinks that to be some phantasmagoria of like some creative mind who wants to escape the brutal reality of material world by dreaming of a kind of, in German, there's Schlaraffenland, because if you hear this kind of stories, this is a particular type of fairy tale kind of thing. Milk is flowing and endless supply of whatever, and everything is just happy and blissful. So but here the Bhagavatam is stating, no, this is a state of existence that is available. And let's have a look at the psychology of the conditioned soul, why it is sometimes, or like often, so difficult to have strong faith in the statements of Bhagavatam, and not just that, because of that faith, if it's there, we can make a strong commitment on this path and aim for this place. But if we don't have the faith or the conviction, we cannot make a commitment. It's natural. If there's no conviction, faith, how can you commit? You must have strong faith to attain that place. So what happens is, let's compare it to a bird who was his life long in a cage. From the outside, everyone could tell you are a bird, you are capable of flying. But this bird has been in this cage forever. He never connected to his ability to fly, be free. So he lives in the consciousness that he is rather a bird, which is actually not a bird. He's some creature in a cage with wings, which have no use otherwise than to just look good, perhaps, if it's a colorful bird, and move around within the cage. So this is one simple thing. There is like conditioning. We are not even aware of so many aspects of the self, of spiritual qualities. That's one process of devotional life, to discover gradually also like the spiritual nature of the self, which is coming from the spiritual nature of Krishna and the spiritual world. The Bhagavatam is teaching us about these things gradually, and one is supposed to have an open mind to embrace these ideas and in this way connect through the mantras, the prayers like the Brahma Samhita. Because we recently spoke about that the mantras are capable to reveal the spiritual realm. There's also Bhaktivinoda Saraswati Thakur is describing in the Brahma Samhita purports that, for example, the Gopal mantra, it's more one of the Gayatri mantras, is able to reveal one particular lila of Krishna, according to the chanter also. But then if the chanter is successful in properly chanting it and arranging his life, then the mantra manifests its full potency. And we also say the Maha mantra, which is given to us, has all of Krishna's energy in it. So successful chanting is actually that the Maha mantra reveals us everything we need to know about our spiritual identity, about Krishna and the spiritual world. This is actually what we're aiming at with the practice, that the Maha mantra manifests its full potency within us. By us properly serving the mantra, by chanting, by meditating, keeping our mind and body clean and in an attitude of service to the name. It's that the Maha mantra is being served, not being enjoyed. And by being served, you enjoy it naturally. If the mantra manifests some ecstasy or like gives you some insight. So this is wanted, that there's faith. And another thing that might happen is, if you compare to human beings who also face life conditions which are very bad, and so they suffer a lot, or like they have poverty, and they're used to this their life long, and around them they also only see poverty and suffering, etc. And they also might have, in order to survive, abandoned all ideas and hopes of an existence that could be better, or what to speak of just being better, being completely the contrary, like in the Bhagavatam. Because it's also something of human psychology, like if a human being is a certain circumstance, we all must adjust in order to be able to function, or sometimes even to simply survive in there, particularly if it's very difficult. And that must mean a mental adjustment also in terms of beliefs and ways of looking at the world and ourselves. And so in some of us it might be we might have deeply disconnected and rejected from even the possibility of such existence, because what is happening, the mind, or like the ego also is hurting. Like the bird who might be hurting. What is this?
Outside.
It's outside. Yes. It might be hurting from looking at that, actually, for example, I failed, or like I have potential that is not available to me. or like the integrity. Like you can say the suffering actually of a human being, particularly in difficult social circumstances or also spiritual circumstances, might even lead to the point that we break. Say that you're a broken person. And many people feel like that. Maybe also every one of us has some part like which is hurting and feels broken because of the suffering, because of the frustrations, because of the difficulties in life. And this hurt is something that also forms into some resistance or even resentment toward life itself, toward God, toward ourselves. The Bhagavatam makes one point, once there's a statement which mentions the phrase like someone who is being envious of his own self. And you might be wondering, how can one be envious of one's own self? No, envy is practically also not granting, kind of wanting to see someone down. This can mean if someone has practically, out of frustration and hurt, lost the desire to exist and wants to annihilate himself, or not grant spiritual existence out of some kind of twisted self-hatred. This can happen if we cannot digest or really process the life circumstances we grew up with or that we see around us. So the mind is a very complex entity, and faith and conviction is really a process that needs some introspection, insight, some guidance, because the simple dynamic that can happen is you hear such descriptions and you think, yeah, it sounds good, but part of you simply thinks this is more like an idea. I don't know, do I have faith in that? Is this even something real? Right? And here the point I want to make is that our mind is so much conditioned. We should also be aware of the condition of our mind when it comes to the possibility of perceiving or assuming higher realities. And then comes the process of spiritual life, which means to deal with the mind to also attain ultimately healing. Spiritual progress means also to heal, which can be also translated as rising to the mode of goodness. Because the Bhagavad Gita is describing that what makes us suffer is passion and ignorance, these two modes. The jiva is actually never broken, but the mind and ego can have intense states of hurt and which leads to some sense of brokenness. And sattva means the reactions of the lower modes are being transformed or they being resolved. This is the power of sattva guna. It's superior to the other modes and therefore can counteract the reactions of the lower modes. So that's why we're aiming at this in simple daily life stuff like cleanliness and order and being regulated and living healthy, but then also on the spiritual platform, cultivating knowledge, try to understand, to distinguish. I guess the Bhagavatam here does give us comparison, establishing what is valuable and what is not. That we are not absorbed so much in these things that have no value to the self. Because sattva guna means also to sharpen your intelligence, to distinguish between things that are necessary and things that you bring you forward and things that don't. And to rather invest in the things that bring you forward. And Srila Prabhupada is describing in the 4th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, which is entitled Transcendental Knowledge, in one purport he's mentioning that due to this condition that I was describing before, where we can feel very, maybe even envious of our own self, broken, that there are 3 challenges a practitioner is supposed to handle with the help of the spiritual master, with the help of senior Vaishnavas. And one is the neglect of spiritual life, due to lack of faith and enthusiasm and determination or understanding. The second is the conception of void or emptiness stemming from this deep frustration of material nature. This is kind of self-annihilation tendency. If people suffer a lot, you tend to, in the material world, people get suicidal. Because they feel this state of existence is not tolerable, I wanted to stop to exist. Suicide is in the sense of an attempt for freedom, to get out of an intolerable situation. And it's considered spiritual suicide to try to annihilate the self in this concept of voidness, oneness. Coming from that, like, poor life is just a drag, too difficult. The soul is hurting, and it doesn't find means to really heal. And hearing of a different world is not really attractive because the need is, I would just want to get out there, leave me alone, I want to stop everything. So there's a need to rectify this understanding, to distinguish between the causes of suffering in the material nature and what the material world is, and that there is a different platform of existence which doesn't even have the potential for suffering, not even potentially, where the soul can be naturally there without any difficulties. And then this was a second challenge, like this voidness idea, like stemming from frustration. And then he points out also the fear of a spiritual identity, and with this coming along a spiritual relationship with the Supreme Lord. Because what happens, the jiva assumes, of course, from its own material existence, how it will be in a spiritual existence. We compare, we also make comparisons, but we are not fully informed about what we compare necessarily. There's some projections going on. So these three things are challenges in spiritual life. Everyone will face to some degree or another. Maybe just some of them, maybe all of them. So here, like, one means is said, like, it's with open mind, hearing the Bhagavatam, and at least give some space to these descriptions. Hold some space in your mind where it is allowed to nourish the idea of the spiritual world, and how would it be to be there? Nasta prayeshu bhatrishu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavatyottamashluke bhaktir bhavati naishtiki. If one serves the Bhagavatam in this way, the book Bhagavat and the person Bhagavat, then in this process of regularly, also nityam bhagavata sevaya, regularly doing that, what the heart becomes completely pure, almost purified, and everything that is troublesome for the heart becomes almost completely destroyed. And devotional service, or the connection to the Lord, which is praised with the supreme mantras, becomes an irrevocable fact. So here Bhagavatam is our connection to Krishna. It's considered the literary incarnation of Krishna. And everything that is in there is meant to move us to be attracted or become attracted to Krishna in the spiritual world. And what is happening here in these verses, we can see the value of a higher state of existence automatically shows us how worthless the things we have are. Srila Prabhupada mentions in the purport as plastic and base iron, what is it called? Base metal. Like, which is there, which has no value, that actually is only something that's value can be exchanged and you can maintain yourself from it. Besides that, it also might be simply as a material much more healthy for your body. You know, plastic is causing cancer. You know, you have plastic bottles, and if you don't leave them in the sun because there are things in there, it's called softeners, whatever is in English the right term. And then through the sun they get away from the plastic and get in your system and cause you cancer. So it's not a very sophisticated material. It's based on mineral oil, just for information, most everyone knows it, but some people maybe don't. It's all from oil. And these things had no place also in the worship of the Lord usually. We just recently spoke about that, how Krishna was being worshipped also in Jagannath Puri. Still some, in the Chaitanya Charitamrita we find these descriptions. For each offering there were new golden plates used in the old one's throne. Or jewelry. I doubt you go to Jagannath Puri, maybe it is, I don't know. Originally that they have plastic jewelry. It's actually, in a sense, it's a bit of an oxymoron to say plastic jewelry. Because jewelry, jewels and plastic, it's like maybe a dim reflection of jewelry. it's considered, to Krishna, the Supreme, you give only the best. That's the principle, I guess, that you heard also to the Guru. Like, would you offer your Guru like some plastic watch, or rather some like watch that has some true metal, some maybe golden, whatever? What would you choose? Plastic watch or
golden watch?
Why? Has more value, right? Simple. And also for Krishna. I personally prefer, some stuff may not be available also for my deities to have, they have like real stones, like this crystals, there's only nice crystal stones that you can use for jewelry, like real natural material. Maybe it has some power, even, crystals have some power, healing power. Because this other stuff, as I said, it has no value, and also, why would you offer something valueless to Krishna simply for the sake, like with the idea of opulence? If something has no value, then there can be no opulence. I want to make this equation, depending how we understand opulence. Opulence usually means value, right? Someone is opulently dressed. You don't say he has just a lot of clothes which are very cheap, right? It's just someone has a bunch of clothes on him which are very cheap and maybe broken. You wouldn't say he's opulently dressed, or? But if he has some really first-class material, very good quality and nicely, worked, then you'd say, oh, that's an opulent or sophisticated way of looking. So similarly with the deity back in the age, also in the previous yuga, Dwapara Yuga, the actual Yuga Dharma was deity worship. And we might also understand why it's not for this Yuga, the Yuga Dharma. Because simply the opulence isn't there. We cannot offer, you don't have the gold, you don't have the silver, where are the rubies and the diamonds and all these kind of things? You don't have them. So therefore also the Archanam path is rather secondary and supporting the Sankirtan Yakya. This age, the actual Yakya is the Sankirtan Yakya, and Archanam paths help support us to purify ourselves, to become more sattvic, as we mentioned before. We can chant more powerfully the holy name. And is that even all these procedures, like artis and worship, becomes only really perfect with the chanting of mantras of the Mahamantra, particularly Sankirtan. So, I would also like to read something from the 5th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, and just that you can absorb in how Krishna even arranged this material world on some higher platforms, resembling to some degree how it is in the spiritual world. And there's some amazing also statements I would like to read, because I think it's very important to hear Srila Prabhupada himself pointing out also some distinctions, which are very important for us to make. Because there's a description of Jambudvip. You can imagine there's some very technical, in the 5th canto, very technical descriptions of how the universe is structured. They're like metaphors, or at least terms used like lotuses and lotus petals resemble different places. There are certain dvipas, islands, and there's Mount Meru. You haven't heard of Mount Meru for sure? No one knows really where to locate it or where to look at it. But it's a big, very big golden mountain in the universe. And he's of course surrounded also by places and many opulences. And here it's described, on the 4 sides of the great mountain known as Sumeru are 4 mountains, Mandara, Meru Mandara, Suparshva and Kumuda, which are like its belts. The length and height of these mountains are calculated to be 10,000 yojanas, 80,000 miles. Standing like flagstaffs on the summits of these 4 mountains are a mango tree, a rose apple tree, a kadamba tree, and a banyan tree. Which is interesting if you think of the universe. I recently heard also there's a tortoise on the core of everything, which is if you look at the universe technically, scientifically, these things wouldn't cross our mind. Why would there be 4 trees there with these different fruits? But This is what the Bhagavatam is telling. Those trees are calculated to have a width of 100 yojanas, 800 miles, and a height of 1,100 yojanas, 8,800 miles. Their branches also spread to a radius of 8,800 miles. And here, Shukadeva Goswami speaking, O best of the Bharata dynasty, between these four mountains are four huge lakes. The water of the first tastes just like milk, the water of the second like honey, and that of the third like sugarcane juice. The fourth lake is filled with pure water. The celestial beings such as the Siddhas, Charanas and Gandharvas, who are also known as demigods, enjoy the facilities of those four lakes. To just imagine this, having a lake just like milk, like honey, sugarcane juice, and then one pure water. Consequently, they have the natural perfections of mystic yoga, such as the power to become smaller than the smallest or greater than the greatest. There are also four celestial gardens named Nandana, Chaitrarata, Vaibrachaka, and Sarvabhadrava. The best of the demigods, along with their wives, who are like ornaments of heavenly beauty, meet together and enjoy within those gardens, while their glories are sung by lesser demigods known as Gandharvas. So similar scenery, there's enjoyment and glorification of the very, sublime beings by lower beings. The sublime beings are actually also servants of Krishna, but they tend to forget that, because they are in the center. But in the spiritual world, this is happening, it's Vaikuntha. There's Lord Vishnu, like in his different forms, is there, and everyone is glorifying him, and at the same time they enjoy the opulences of the spiritual world. There's nothing like, no dirty place, or like, later we will hear, there's no scorching heat, no cold, no thirst, no hunger, just nothing like that, as we know from a world of variety. And thinking of the other thing, of the spiritual world, which has variety but is bereft of all the bad side effects of material variety, sounds a bit too fantastic for the jiva. But this is due to limitation. Let's compare it to the bird who was always in the cage and isn't even aware he could fly. Even if he sees others fly, he still might doubt, no, my life experience is, I'm a cage bird even if I'm a bird, but I'm a cage bird now, that's how it is. Identifying with one's condition, that's what's happening. Even Indra was once given the body of a hawk, and it's a horrible condition compared to being the king of heaven and being a hawk. And then Narada Muni wanted to bring him back. Okay, now like you made the experiment, come back and to your original state. And he said, no. So much things to do, I have my family, my hawk family, and I have stool to eat and things to do. And he was completely identified with this horrible condition. And he didn't even want to hear about his original place. So similarly, there's also, with us, part of us is very irrationally attached even to a completely horrible state of existence. And it needs to be gradually purified. On the lower slopes of the Mandara mountain is a mango tree named Devajuta. It is 1,100 yojanas high. Mangoes as big as a mountain peak and as sweet as nectar fall from the top of this tree for the enjoyment of the denizens of heaven. Mangoes as big as a mountain peak. When all those solid fruits fall from such height, they break, and the sweet, fragrant juice within them flows out and becomes increasingly more fragrant as it mixes with other scents. So the thing is, when here, like some fruit, even would be, let's say, watermelon, falls down and breaks, and the juice flows. At the end, you don't have even a better juice; you have juice mixed with dirt. But there it's like it mixes with other items; it becomes even more enjoyable. There's even nothing like this duality of dirt so much as we know it here, value and worthless kind of items. So that juice cascades from the mountain and waterfalls and becomes a river called Arunoda, which flows pleasantly through the eastern side of Ilavrita, this is the area. The pious wives of the Yakshas act as personal maidservants to assist Bhavani, the wife of Lord Shiva. Because they drink the water of the river Arunoda, their bodies become fragrant, and as the air carries away that fragrance, it perfumes the entire atmosphere for 80 miles around. You can also see in the spiritual world, Lord Krishna or like Lord Narayan, his fragrance, his natural smell of body is flowery, very fragrant, pleasant to smell, and fulfills the area. It was even said when Krishna came as Rishabdev and performed this really heavy yoga form, where he ripped out his hair, and it said he was going around naked like a madman, and he was also passing stool and laying in it. But what happened is, like, his stool was extremely fragrant, like in a very pleasant way, like for many miles around people felt, oh, what a fragrance smell. Transcendental. There was Rishabdev, Krishna himself, even this was apparently an element which is like disgusting. No, in the spiritual world there's nothing disgusting. So it was even there, like, it was very attractive feature. And so here the associates become very fragrant by drinking this water. Similarly, the fruits of the jambu tree, which are full of pulp and have very small seeds, fall from a great height and break to pieces. Those fruits are the size of elephants, and the juice gliding from them becomes a river named Jambu Nadi. This river falls a distance of 10,000 yojanas from the summit of Meru Mandala to the southern side of Ilavrita and floods the entire land of Ilavrita with juice. The mud on both banks of the river Jambu Nadi, being moistened by the flowing juice and then dried by the air in the sunshine, produces huge quantities of gold, called Jambunada. The denizens of heaven use this gold of various kinds of ornaments. Therefore all the inhabitants of the heavenly planets and their youthful wives are fully decorated with golden helmets, bangles, and belts, and thus they enjoy life. So everything full of opulence. It's also natural, if you think of it, Krishna supreme enjoyer, let's say he's full of opulence, naturally also his surrounding, the world must provide or like support this enjoyment, otherwise how would it be? He's Krishna, the Supreme Lord, has all his opulences, but around him there's scarcity. It wouldn't work. It doesn't make sense. He of course naturally manifests all this opulence, and everyone who is associated of him naturally enjoys these opulences with him. Not because they aim for that, but it naturally comes. And this is an attractive feature to also understand, like the fear of a spiritual identity as we speak, is completely irrational in that sense. If you truly understand, actually Krishna is providing to much more than you could possibly need in the spiritual world. And the possibilities your body has in the spiritual world is comparatively unthinkable. All the mystic opulences and the way you can exchange with Krishna. So there's no need to fear anything because there's no scarcity, no lack of anything, no suffering in any way. Krishna is providing perfectly. And everyone enjoys life. It's like that. Also in Vaikuntha you see they have their Vaikuntha airplanes, the couples, the Vaikuntha Vasis, male and female, and they always engage in glorifying the Lord and like being completely in ecstasy. So Vaikuntha, no fear of anything. And on the side of Suparsha mountain stands a big tree called Mahakadamba, which is very celebrated. From the hollows of this tree flow 5 rivers of honey, each above 5 vyamas wide. This flowing honey falls incessantly from the top of Suparsha mountain and flows all around Ilavrita, beginning from the western side. Thus the whole land is saturated with the pleasing fragrance. And I skip 1-2 verses to come to another verse. Yes. Here's also said one more description of the residents. We still only at the heavenly planets. We are not even in Vaikuntha. Just heavenly planets in this world. The residents of the mature world who enjoy the products of these flowing rivers have no wrinkles on their bodies and no grey hair. They never feel fatigue, and perspiration does not give their bodies a bad odor. They are not afflicted by old age, disease, or untimely death. They do not suffer from chilly cold or scorching heat, nor do their bodies lose their luster. They all live very happily without anxieties until death. What we mentioned before, even on the heavenly planets there's birth, which is not very troublesome for you. You practically manifest it, grow up, and that's it. And then you die. So that's the suffering. You have to let go of that existence at some point. So in the Prabhupada's, in the purport says, where he describes, how can the people be happy? They must suffer from all the misery of materialism. Their bodies become wrinkled and gradually deteriorate until they become almost like dwarfs, and a bad odor emanates from their bodies because of unclean perspiration resulting from eating all kinds of nasty things. This is not human civilization. If people actually want happiness in this life and want to prepare for the best in the next life, they must adopt the Vedic civilization. In a Vedic civilization, there's a full supply of all the necessities mentioned above. So these are, I wanted to read, to have some illustrations, even in the higher material realms, how it looks like, and how this is already close to the spiritual world, which also, where there are also many descriptions in the Srimad Bhagavatam. And therefore it's so important to meditate and daily read Bhagavatam, because this is feeding your mind with that what is needed. That you can develop the desire to go back to the spiritual world. And this is also where Krishna always comes. It says, there's some, in the second canto, a verse how Krishna assumes different forms to always reclaim the fallen souls. And now today you hear about Guru Tattva, and also we see like there's today Advaita Acharya's appearance day. Who's Advaita Acharya in Tattva or identity?
Isn't he like Mahavishnu and Shiva combined?
Yes. Sometimes there are two statements, Mahavishnu, and sometimes some scriptures say Mahavishnu and Shiva, which is not such a big, problem, because Mahavishnu actually manifests Shiva. There's in Sadashiva in the spiritual world, which is more or less like a Vishnu. He is on Tattva, but the Advaita Acharya is Mahavishnu. And where is Vishnu Tattva coming from? Balaram, exactly. He manifests the first Chatavyuha, then comes Lord Narayana, and then comes the second Chatavyuha, and then comes Mahavishnu. So Balaram and Nityananda are identical, they're the Supreme Gurus, and their task is, they come to reclaim the fallen souls by always again spreading this message, remembering or reminding the jivas on their condition, and that they say, hey, this is not your home, come back to the spiritual world, Krishna is waiting. Advaita Acharya he was very perturbed, very unhappy to see in his time when he was in Navadvip. There was also a rise of impersonalism. I think Shaivites were a lot present there, if I'm correct, and Vaishnavism was not so practiced as desired. So he was very concerned. And then he sat down on the Ganges, and it's interesting, you can see like he's Vishnu himself, actually, the Advaita Acharya, and then he worships a Shalikam Shila, which is also Vishnu. So Vishnu sits and worships Vishnu in order to call Vishnu. No, and it's Mahaprabhu. So he's doing something which is remarkable. He said his prayers or his calling out for Krishna to appear was so strong and powerful that it penetrated all the layers of the universe. So then it reached there in Vaikuntha, it reached to Krishna, and you heard Advaita Acharya calling for him to come. So then he practically, it's due to him that Mahaprabhu manifested himself. Advaita Acharya was strongly calling. And we can learn from that also what we must do in order to see Krishna. We must learn to really strongly call. To Govinda Swami used to say we should learn to cry for Krishna, to be really eager, like for Guru, the same thing. If you want your Guru, You have to sincerely desire it. The more sincere you desire, the more Krishna resonates with it. You get according to your purity of desire. That's also my experience. We will not get into that, but this is just how it is. The more pure your intention, the more pure the Vaishnava Krishna sends you. That's a simple thing. And then sometimes it's also just necessary. Maybe you or some devotees made experiences which allow the conclusion, oh, this guru was not pure, but then not say, yeah, as a disciple, how pure were they? Right? So it's Krishna arranges everything perfectly so that we can grow. Yeah, and let's take the blessings, or pray for the blessings of Advaita Acharya also for your course today, that you're in Guru Tattva, that you absorb, and that from there on are the paths to find the Guru that guides you the best in your spiritual life. Hare Krishna. Are there any comments or questions in case we would use the microphone also?
I have a question. When we were at this Hirsch event and this Vidyabhaskar Acharya, he spoke about Jnana Yoga and the two functions of the mind, accepting and rejecting, and he also mentioned conviction that comes from the mind. And you a little bit spoke about this now. Can you elaborate the connection maybe a little bit more? What is,
Yeah. Conviction, we could maybe use another words, comes from if your mind has a good reason to believe what he just heard. When there's arguments that provide conclusive statement, or the mind can accept a certain concept because it's functional, okay, accept that. But actually more the conviction, it said, comes also from the intelligence, because it can determine if the intelligence is able to distinguish, to see what is what. And then, for example, what in the shloka was here, see the valuable thing in contrast to the worthless, to distinguish the value, so it can decide for the valuable stuff, and also develop a determination to always get what is valuable instead of being entangled what is not valuable. So determination has, or a conviction has to do with is a learning process also. The more I learn and properly understand a given thing, a process perhaps like Bhakti Yoga, the more I can also create a conviction that it works, because I also apply it based on my understanding. The deeper my understanding is, the more sincere my practice, the more experience I make, the more convinced I can get. Or if I see how it works on others who practice sincerely. So in this way the mind holds also our beliefs, the thinking, feeling, the willing is function of the mind in cooperation with intelligence. Of course they don't exist completely separate. In analysis, of course, we separate them, and also with the ego. This is, some thoughts on that?
Krishna, you were speaking about that faith, and for me it's sometimes very difficult if I hear these descriptions of the spiritual world, like as you said, like a bird in a cage. Maybe he's also in an apartment and he has no idea of the outside world, and then you hear these descriptions and you, for me, I kind of start to ask myself, how can I get this like spark of faith in it, that it's really true? Because sometimes I ask myself if I want to believe it and that's why I'm following, or is it just blindly following, you know what I mean? Like, how can we have that initial faith? How can we get that?
I mean, my understanding, there are different impetuses that can stimulate your faith. It can be a strong spiritual experience in the process, like in prayer or in chanting, kirtan, like something happens to your mind which is transforming it or gives you an insight that was unprecedented, which allows you to thrive on it, would be one thing, like some revelation experience. This is rather rare, but also happens. What we also do in our tradition, we have, like, coming to what we in the presentation, he presented Jnana Yoga, and Jnana Yoga is an important part also of Bhakti. Analytical study, understanding this world, and also again here comparing the Sat and Asat. Na sato vidyate bhavo, na bhavo vidyate satah, uvayo vidarishtantas tvanayos tattvadarshibhi. Those who see the truth, they're not believers in truth, they see it. And then they remain in truth. It's not a matter of that sense of faith. Truth is truth. It's like reality you can't argue with, so to speak. And they say they come to the conclusion of what is temporary and what is eternal by studying the nature of both. So also devotees is supposed to study the arguments of logic and analysis, like in the Samkhya philosophy of the Bhagavatam, to get the understanding the material nature is not the all in all. It's one manifestation, it has principles, but it has an origin. It has rules by which it works and where do they come from. And that we can observe, even within matter, ourselves as eternal beings in the process of yoga. We can. There's always, we learn to distinguish the Atma from the body, to understand the features of Atma in terms of being timeless, unchangeable, deathless. Because you can, by becoming more and more aware, you can distinguish the self from the body. And then logic dictates, okay, if I'm not this body but exist on a different platform, there must be also a realm where the Jiva is at home. Like this could be a path, like to really analytical study, intelligence, but in that experience through the devotional process. And there might be other things just don't come to my mind. But these are two things. The association is important. People are determined and develop a desire, then that your mind is open. We can influence our mind that it is open to these ideas instead of being skeptical and perhaps cynical about things. And this also has to do with working on our own personality. Like I mentioned the spirit in the cage example also. Maybe it's not so adequate for everything I wanted to say with that. But that also, if human beings accustom themselves to a particular condition of life which may be very low, they might also tend to have an issue to really accept and love themselves because they violate their own integrity, because kind of feeling, oh, I degraded myself. And as a self-punishment, I should stay there. Like it's more subconscious. But there's also a task of really getting connected with yourself and like coming into this positive connection. Because also material level, often we are so disconnected from stuff that happens within us. So we don't even have a good picture of our material identity, of not to speak of that which is beyond that. So there's some task to understand yourself better and better by self-exploration, but also by relating positively and supportive to yourself. That's another direction. Is that answering you? Alright. Thank you very much. Granta Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai,
Jai.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Keshava ki
Jai.